with host Kevin Evans. To continue the conversation, head over to codetocloud.io.
Hey, welcome to, I'm going to say it was the first episode of the Code to Cloud podcast, but it's like number 2 in the list, right? And I'm joined with our amazing guest, Ned Bellavance. I've had Ned on before. People know Ned is from Ned in the Clouds. And today we're going to be talking about the 2025 playbook, right? For cloud personas, tech personas. I don't know, Ned, what do you think?
I don't know what to label myself as. I guess I think of myself first and foremost as an educator.
Yep.
And it just happens to be the thing that I really like to educate people about is technology. So I guess I'm a technical educator, technically.
I would agree, right? I mean, tech stacks come and go. Is that the right phrase? Or they evolve? Is that a better way of saying it, right?
Yeah, I would. Tech stacks very rarely disappear entirely. There's still plenty of people running a traditional LAMP stack. There's people still running VMware. We can go back further and talk about how there's people just running Sun servers somewhere, and it's still running like a website for a university somewhere. It might seem like an odd example, but I'm pulling from personal experience. So as far as I can tell, most technologies never actually die, but they become less popular. They become boring, which is almost like the best thing for a technology, to become boring, because that means it's stable and mature and you're not throwing weird stuff at it all the time, but it's also not exciting. And so there's always some new exciting thing coming out of the woodwork that we have to learn ourselves and then educate other people on.
I completely agree. Like, I remember the first time I saw a Sun server. Just to touch on this, like a side story.
Mm-hmm.
And I just thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I was asking people, what's that? Oh, it runs Unix, or a flavor of Unix, right? I'm like, what's Unix, right? And that's how I started off down that route, right? Down to Linux and, like you said, LAMP, right? And all that good stuff. But yeah, like everything about it, its architecture, it was a different kind of server as well, right? I think it had a different chipset, right? From what it ran on, from traditional x86. And it had like, it uses iSCSI drives, right? Where we had IDE and SATA drives, right? And those kind of things. I'm really showing my age now. I'm dating myself, right? Considerably bad. But yeah, do you know what I love about tech is the intrigue. Like you said, things are like trends and they go up and down, right? With popularity and everything else. But there's always something new around the corner to sort of keep you energized, right? Even when you get in those lulls. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. I do more educating now than, hands-on. But this week, my main point of conversation has been adaptive cloud. And I'm not saying we're going back to the future, we're going back to on-prem, right? But it was, buying physical pieces of tin, right, to deploy, a cloud stack on that, right? And it was taking me back to all the stuff that I learned previously. So it became useful again, right? VLANs, right? Local storage, chipsets, right? Local IOPS, right? How to architect the servers, configuration and build, right? And everything else. So it's pretty refreshing. What have you been up to this week?
That's certainly what I came up through was physical servers, having to configure the network, having to configure the storage, doing all those items through various difficult interfaces to use. And it gave you an appreciation when you move things to the cloud at just how much was being taken care of for you behind the scenes. Like, you don't have to create VLANs in the cloud. You just set up another VNet and, you coordinate it off the way you need it to. Fortunately, I've kept a home lab running this whole time that has, segmented VLANs, and I've got some stuff that's booting off the network, and I've run my own DHCP server inside the lab that does some interesting stuff. And it's kept me at least 1 foot in that sort of local administration while still doing a lot of stuff in the cloud. And I think you're right. There is a general trend to embrace what used to be called hybrid computing, but I guess it's being called adaptive cloud now. The terminology changes, but the story is still the same. You need to run some stuff on-prem. You need to run some stuff in a public cloud, and sometimes in a colo facility. And there's no reason to just pick one.
No, there's some workloads that just can't move to the cloud, right? Or the public cloud. So it's how do you extend that stack from the cloud back to on-premise, right? In some fashion. I'm keen to understand, right? This is a pretty nerdy question. What switch have you got, right, in your home lab?
I used to have a Cisco Catalyst switch.
Nice.
But that thing was so loud.
Was it green?
Ridiculous.
Was it green? Was it the green one, or was it?
It was an ugly green. I won't say an ugly green. It was a traditional green. One could say. So, I actually bought another switch. I'm trying to remember the brand. I think it's a TP-Link, and I've recently read that TP-Link may be not the best thing to be running, especially if it's public facing. But it is internally facing only, so I don't have to worry about it as much.
That's awesome. Can you remember when we're digressing here massively, but I think this is great. Do you remember you used to, you'd buy, a Cisco switch, right? The green ones. That was my era. You used to get that magnet in the box, the big, and it was supposed to go on the side of your rack or whatever, right? To say it was a Cisco rack, right? It was it was a nice marketing gift, right? That you would get with a Cisco piece of networking equipment. Well, for years, I had one on the side of my fridge at home, and my kids were they knew the Cisco logo before they knew the McDonald's logo. It was pretty.
I know the feeling. My kids know the HashiCorp logo, and there's no reason that they should, but it makes its way onto coffee mugs and other random knickknacks that I've amassed over the years. So they just constantly see it, and they're they just assume that's normal until they go somewhere else. They're like, oh, maybe not.
Yeah, I have I think it's a closet / cupboard of event trinkets, right? Like water bottles, or I've got so much Azure stuff, it's unbelievable, right? As you can probably imagine. But they're my son's even got the I think it's the Azure raccoon sticker on his water bottle that he takes to school because he thought it looked cool. Just blown away. So I wanted to speak about the playbook for 2025, right? So we can try and cast some guidance, some wisdom, right, to our community and our listeners. And I wanted to really start with certifications, right? When I've previously entered a new technology field, especially with cloud, I mean, it was 2016. I started the AWS Solutions Architect exam, right? And started building towards that. And I remember going on Udemy, right? I can't remember who the instructor was. I think it was A Cloud Guru at the time, right? Shout out to those guys.
That would make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And watching all these AWS videos, trying to understand what the cloud was, and architectural concepts and everything else. But even trying to figure out which was the right cert to start with was not difficult, but when you don't know, you don't know. So what's your perspective on, one, the value of certifications, and two, if you're trying to figure out which route you want to take, where's a good place to start potentially? And I know Google's always the backup, right? If you want to be figuring out what you want to do, but I'd like to get your take on this.
Yeah, I appreciate what certifications can do for you, which is a few things. One, it gives you a course of study. So here's some objectives, here's some learning material, and here's a way to measure your progress. And so I really appreciate that certifications can give you that baseline to study for. And if that's all you use them for, I think they can help you out tremendously, especially when you're just getting started. Sometimes you have to get certifications for the job you're working at. I know I was working for a consulting group for a number of years, and to maintain certain level of partnerships with Microsoft or VMware or what company X, we needed to have a certain number of people with X certifications. So sometimes it was purely, hey, you just need to take this cert so we can maintain our platinum partnership with whomever. That's less exciting. I think you can also get too lost in certifications and make that the goal. And for me, the goal is not the certification. The goal is the practical knowledge of how to use the technology. And the certification is a means to that end. But if you are just like chasing the golden jacket from AWS, I mean, that's quite an accomplishment, and I appreciate that. But have you filled your head with practical, useful information, or have you just filled your head with a bunch of cloud trivia? I'm not sure. So I think as long as you approach certifications as a means to an end, and that end being actually understanding the technology and being able to use it productively, then they're fantastic. But I would avoid them becoming a crutch or your obsession.
Yeah, I've seen memes online, right? Like, you've seen those North Korean generals with all the medals, right, on the jacket, and people comparing it, right, to cloud certifications, right, with folks that have got 8, 9, 10 certs, but 0 experience, right? So they've learned how to master the exam and the certification, but I think to your point, doubling down on a certification, and there's some quite broad ones out there, right? Especially in the cloud space. Like if we take, for example, let's talk about the AZ-104. So broad, right? It's got everything but the kitchen sink in there, right? Which is a great place to start if you don't know what you're really into, because clouds are big, right? They've got multiple services, multiple pillars, right? And sometimes you need to start with step 1 rather than step 5, 6, or 7. So getting the certification, like for me, and then building the labs and getting that hands-on experience, and then passing the exam and everything else was like, it built momentum, right, for my next steps with trying to get a role or trying to maybe get a different role or change careers in tech. That worked really well for me. One of my top tips with that is, so we used to buy these things called books, right? Especially with certain cloud certifications. I used to just randomly connect with the authors of the books, right, on LinkedIn. Just like thank them, right, for the information, everything else. That led on to some really good opportunities, by the way, because what you start to realize is where those authors hang out, right, maybe online, and then it introduces you to even more content, right, or more learning resources, or it might give you inspiration for your next certification, right? So that's one of my top tips that's worked well for me anyway in the past.
Yeah, reaching out to other humans, generally a positive thing, though it can feel a little awkward at first.
Yeah, like it did feel a bit weird. I was like, these people don't know who I am. Like you'll get different feedback for sure, right?
Yeah.
There's some great human beings out there. That's all I'm gonna say. So most of the time they'll get back to you. Right?
They will. And probably the most important follow-up tip to that is, if you're going to reach out to one of these people, have an ask or have a question or provide some sort of useful feedback to them. Don't just send them a message that says, hi. Because I get those sometimes. I'll get a LinkedIn connection, and I'll accept it. And then I'll get a message from them that just says, hey. I don't know what to do with that. So I just ignore it until they actually have a question that I can help answer, or they have some feedback on something that I did. Because just saying hi it's not helpful.
That's how we met, right? No, I'm not joking, but
Well,
but
I
it's
think
true.
you did. So, I mean, you're a good example. You did reach out to me on LinkedIn, but it wasn't just hi. It was asking me if I would be interested in doing something collaboratively around landing zones. So it was like a whole pitch, more or less. And then I was amenable to it. So we did that. But also, even if I hadn't been ready to do it then, didn't have the bandwidth, I would know like you're someone who's looking for a collaboration. And the next time I need someone to do a project with, I could reach out to Kevin and be like, hey, sorry I couldn't do the last project, but let's try it with this one.
Yeah, it's again that gets onto one of our further steps down the road. But I feel I've had some mentors in the past, and I thought these people were like rock stars, right? And like really ahead in their career, that kind of thing, right? You feel like they're elevated. So the number one tip I got from them was, if you're going to reach out, to your point, Ned, turn up with an ask or turn up with an action plan. So you're effectively not wasting their time, right? In the nicest possible way. Because Ned, I bet you get messages every day, right? Like from all over the place, right? From content from maybe 3 or 4 years ago, from last week, or maybe you spoke at an event or whatever, right? Or it might be about your newsletters, right? That you're starting to send out. So turn up in the right way, right? And if you're struggling to put that piece of text together, then ChatGPT is your friend, right? If you're trying to, if you're terrible at writing, right, or putting text together, right, I'm like that. Then you want other human beings to try and understand it in a better way, then just run it through ChatGPT, right?
That can definitely be helpful with the tone or the composition of the message, but the core idea still needs to be something that's relevant.
Yeah. Don't go on ChatGPT and say, write an intro message to Kevin and Ned. That will get them on the hook, right? Because we'll spot that. We'll spot that a mile away, right? So
most likely, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. No, certification. So what would be your top 3 certs for this year that you would think are, 1, it's going to elevate my current skill set, or 2, I want to try and get into cloud, right? Or into tech in some way. What would be your top 3? And they could be from any provider.
I guess it really depends on where you're starting. Because if you're starting at, well, I already have some certifications in, or I have a really good baseline understanding of Linux and, let's say, Azure, then it might make sense to sit some of the Azure certifications just so you can prove that you have skills. But if you're brand new to the cloud and you don't know anything about anything, then you might want to start with, honestly, like one of the most important skill sets that I've picked up over the years is knowing how to interact with Linux. Linux runs like 70% of the workloads on Azure are Linux based. So if you're coming from more of like a traditional VMware Windows background, then go get the like Linux Foundation certificate, honestly. I know it's not cloud, but it's going to pay dividends. Beyond that, I think any of the Kubernetes certifications would probably be worth your time. I would still get that Linux certification first because that'll give you some of the core principles that you're going to then apply with the Kubernetes certification. And because Kubernetes runs across all the major public clouds and on-prem and wherever the heck you want it to, that's a skill set that's very transferable across the different domains. And then I would actually maybe pursue a programming certification of some kind, because honestly, even though like I'm an ops person and I came up with an ops background, I work with a stunning amount of code these days. And so being able to effectively write, doesn't have to be full-blown applications, right? I'm not writing applications here, but I am writing scripts. I am writing little plugins. I am updating or modifying other people's software. Having a decent foundation in one of the big programming languages probably would pay dividends as well. Like Python would be a good place to start, or Go, also very popular. I've never been able to wrap my brain around JavaScript and TypeScript, but I know some people really love it. So if that language makes sense to you, then maybe pursue that. But yeah, it's funny. I didn't mention a single cloud certification, really, because I think it's more important to learn transferable skills first. And then if you want to get into the cloud-specific implementations, that's great. Go for it. But I would want something that's transferable, because you are going to be working in a multi-cloud environment wherever you end up.
I couldn't agree more. Getting those Linux skills is huge. I remember when I started off, I was like 12, 13 years old, and I heard about Linux, right? I was trying to track it down everywhere. And back in those days, you got it on a front of a magazine, right? It was like a CD. And I just remember installing like Red Hat Linux on my computer at home. I remember my dad going, well, you can't play video games on that, right? Like, right? No Unreal Tournament, right? I was like, yeah, but look at it. It's teaching me so much, right? About how operating systems work, right? That's what I took away from it at the time. It was like a vertical learning curve because you just didn't have the resources online, right? The forums and everything else, right? And it was a very close-knit community. It's probably the best way of describing it. But now those skills just come through and through, right? So yeah, that Linux Foundation cert, perfect. Looking to know where to start with Linux. Maybe you've never used it before. If you want to start off with baby steps and you're running a Windows operating system, then there's Windows Subsystem for Linux, right? Which is like a virtualized environment. Apart from that, go out there and get either Fedora or Ubuntu, right? And they've got to be in the top 5, right? I'm not going to push anyone down the Arc route, right? Or Arch, sorry. That's a pretty hardcore, but
a little bit.
Fedora is a Red Hat downstream distribution, right? It's obviously maintained, developed by Red Hat. Red Hat is used in the enterprise space quite a lot, right? And then there's Ubuntu, which is based off Debian, which is a bit of a rock star, right, in the community. So to Ned's point, like, those operating systems are free to download and install. And even just by starting to use those operating systems, you'll start learning skills. I mean, simple things like editing text files within the terminal. What is a terminal? How'd you get started with that, right? Bash, right? The born again shell. And to your point with like Python and learning a programming language, well, guess what? You can run those on Linux as well. And you start doing weird and wonderful things with YAML files, right? And that drags you into the Kubernetes world, right? And the orchestration platforms. I really like the idea of it being transferable because then you can pivot. I'm really big on, if you don't know what you really want to do as well, if you start off there, you're going to get that taste for technical intensity, but you're also going to get that ability to pivot as well. So you can transfer that knowledge, right, from platform to platform. I'm an ops person, and I have conversations a lot with customers and community, and I go in and go, everyone's going to be a developer. And they look at me like I'm saying strange and weird things. Like, no, we're not. Right? And I'm like, yes, I've been through the same transition as well. Right? For me, it was Terraform. Right? So HCL. And now I'm building into other things. Right? So 100% agree. So, I mean, it takes care of certs, right? I just want to go on to the second step. So, building with purpose. So, this is more about planning your year out a little bit, right? So, we talked about certifications and where to go, but I don't know about you, Ned, but I journal. I never thought I would, right? But I started journaling about 18 months ago, right? And it really helped with planning out my career or what I wanted to do next. Or just, even if it's not work stuff, it was around, I want to learn this because I think it looks cool. Right? So I was breaking it down into chunks and steps. So like building with purpose. Now I know life gets in the way, right? It's not a hard and fast agenda that you must adhere to, but I think if you start writing it down physically, it makes it more real. So by the end of 2025, you might want to pass that Kubernetes exam. Like, what are the steps that you need to pass that exam, right? That certification. So writing it down. So I think the question I've got for you, Ned, right, is even if it's, I speak to startups as well. I'm seeing a lot of early in careers now build startups rather than, like, for me and you, we were like server monkeys, right, or data center monkeys.
Totally.
They're actually building products because they can just build their business online from home.
Mm-hmm.
So whether it's building a product or strategy or a personal brand, I think, people make New Year's resolutions. I'm not really a fan of those. I'm more about execution, right? So if you build a purpose, it's about getting those ideas out of your head and into the world, right? And making them valuable, right? Adding value to either yourself or to wherever you're trying to go next. Do you have any advice around that? What's your take on it? What's worked for you in the past?
For me, I need a forcing function to pursue something. Whether that's making a commitment to somebody else that, hey, we're going to do this thing together over the next, 4 months or something. Could just be a project with a deadline that's like, okay, well, I said I was going to build this course or do this thing. So, and it's due on this date. So I need to force myself to do it. I need that external factor to get me to do something. But that's just because I know my own psychology at this point. I'm in my mid 40s. I figured a couple things out about myself. And one of those things is I have a certain level of intrinsic motivation, but I need some external factor to also put pressure on me to actually accomplish that goal. Otherwise, I'll defer it. I'll put it off. I'll find other things to do. I'll go, ooh, that's shiny. I want to check that out. And I can get very distracted quickly. So having that overriding external factor saying, hey, no, but you said you do this and somebody's depending on you to deliver, that will help me actually accomplish a goal. Not everybody's like that. So a lot of like figuring out what works for you is figuring out your own psychology and your like what motivates you to do something. And if you're, 100% intrinsic, I don't think anybody is, then you can just make a decision and do it. But I think a lot of people, it's a combination of both. And so just figuring out what works for you to keep that motivation up once you've determined there are certain things you want to do. And probably also knowing why you're doing it. Like the doing it is not the reason. Doing it is important, but what's the larger goal that you're reaching towards? What's the big plan, in that you want to accomplish? How do you want to feel at the end of it? And I know it sounds a little bit vague and psychology kind of related, but if you're trying to figure out how to be successful in the things you want to accomplish, you got to go into it with a sort of a planning mindset and also understanding yourself and what motivates you.
I've been through a very similar journey. I got to like 35 and I started to map out my brain. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It was like starting to click, right? I just want to set expectations out there because we may have, a younger audience or early in career trying to, there's a lot of pressure sometimes to reach certain milestones or obtain certain goals and figure life out, right? I've only met a handful of people where they've just got it straight away, right? In my lifetime, right? It's so understanding what works for you. I'm the same, Ned, right? I'm good at, I have like this nagging voice in the back of my head that's like, you need to do this or come up with this next or try and figure this out. But to your point, having a deadline sometimes, a bit like the certification thing before that we were talking about, having that date, that gives you the motivation because you said you're going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think that works really well. It's like turning up in the right way. And I think that's really valuable advice. So yeah, the bigger picture. And you might be thinking, well, I don't know what the bigger picture is. And that's something I've wrestled with personally as well. Like, where do I want to be in 5 years? You know, when you hear these people and they say got a 10-year plan, I'm like, well, that doesn't really work in tech, right? Yeah, exactly. What's your 10-year plan?
Well, at this point, I have no idea. And
exactly,
that's
right?
exactly where I would. I think you can make really, really vague plans at that kind of like decade time scale. Like maybe, you're in your 20s and you're like, in 10 years, I want to own a house. And like, just keep it that vague. Like, don't know where, don't know what size, but I've just kind of set a general goal. 10 years in the future, I want to be a homeowner. And that's a goal that you can work towards. But as you like diminish that time scale and you get to 5 years or 3 years, then you can be more specific about things. And that's another thing I've learned is don't try to be really specific about where you're going to be in 5 years, but try to be very specific when you're setting monthly or like weekly goals, because that's realistic. You can actually kind of have a general idea of where things are going. Think of it like the weather. Like a 3-day forecast, pretty good, pretty accurate. 10 days, you're 70% accurate maybe. You start moving out to months and there's just like vague general ideas. And then there's like the whole climate thing, and that's like on decades long time scales that you're following. So you could sort of apply that same sort of level of specificity to your life.
Wise words. Wish I'd had that when I was starting out.
Me too.
I don't beat yourself up as well too much, right? Don't be too hard on yourself if it doesn't work out. When I was 25, I was working at a company and I made this bold statement that I was going to immigrate to Canada, which eventually happened. But I thought it was going to happen like in 3 years. And this project manager at the time, he was obviously a lot wiser than me. Went, yeah, 10 years. I think you might be able to do it. And I was like, no, I'm going to do that in 3, right? 10 years to the day, pretty much. I immigrated, right? It's so stuck in the back of my head. So it's a windy road. That's probably,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's not a straight line. So when you see these influencers or whatever,
anybody that claims to have it figured out is probably lying.
Yeah.
And like, just to give you a personal example, right? When I was in my early 20s, I was working in retail. I wasn't even working with computers, and I was a store manager at a retail store. And I really thought that my career trajectory was, okay, become a training store manager. That was the next like step up, and then become an area manager and then a district manager. And then who knows, maybe you'll go work at corporate doing something. That's what I thought my career trajectory was going to be. And it didn't work out that way. I instead kind of realized that maybe I hate working in retail and got a job on help desk and started working my way up through help desk. And then I went to go work for a small company, and I really liked my boss. He was a really cool guy. We had a great team, great dynamic. There was only like 4 of us. And I thought, oh, well, what I really want to do is I want to be an IT manager, like head of IT at one of these small companies. That's what I want to do now, because I see he's successful. I like what he's doing. That's what I'm going to work towards. And I even went back to school to get my MBA because I thought that would help me become a manager and be, in charge of a whole IT department. And then that shifted again. I ended up in consulting and doing consulting for like 7-8 years. And I thought I was going to be in consulting forever. And then I ended up working for myself as a technical educator. So like, you're constantly going to be presented with new opportunities. And I feel lucky that I didn't let myself ever get totally locked in to this is the future. This is exactly how it's going to be. and I don't care what opportunities are put in front of me or what roadblocks I hit. No, I'm just going to focus on this one thing. I'm going to be a manager of a 200-person company in IT. That's what I'm going to do. I would have been miserable, right? And I think, I guess another big piece of advice is maintain flexibility in your thinking and your planning, and take advantage of opportunities when they present themselves. When somebody goes, hey, I like what you helped out make these videos at work, and we have additional videos that we need made. Would you be interested in like a paid opportunity to do that? Say yes. Like, somebody's handing you a potential other path, and even if it doesn't work out, it's worth trying, because you might realize that, oh, I actually like this other thing way better than what I was doing. Don't let your, what my daughter calls it, rock brain. Don't let your brain like calcify into rock. Like, you want it to be more plastic brain.
She's a genius.
I mean, she didn't make that up. She got it from her occupational therapist. But like, when she said that, I was like, rock brain. That is exactly that. Just, it's the perfect metaphor for how some people approach everything. It's like, no, this is the way it has to be, and I will brook no changes. And if you can like let that go and just be more plastic about things and flexible, I think you turn out with a better life, a happier life, let's say.
I feel like we've had similar paths. All I wanted to be was a manager, and once I got into that management position, it was like, I don't want to do this, right? Yeah, it's pivot and flexibility, but I love the analogy of don't have a rock brain.
Yeah.
Have a flexible plastic brain. Absolutely love that. Like, it's got to be like quote of the year. Absolutely love it. Yeah, some golden advice there. So yeah, learn how to pivot, and opportunities just turn up randomly, and even if you don't think they're valuable, maybe you should double click on it, right, and look into it. Zoom in on that. I think that's golden advice.
And it might not pan out. That's the other thing, is be okay with failing at a thing, or just, cut your losses. Realize this is not working. I tried, like, again, personal experience, right? One of the things I tried to be was an analyst for a while, and I was writing analyst reports and taking briefings and stuff. And after doing that for a year, I realized pretty quickly that I don't enjoy being an analyst. And it's not even that I like couldn't do it. Like, I could do the work. I just didn't want to do the work. And rather than forcing myself to keep doing it, I said to the company, I'm like, I don't think this is for me. And we split amicably, and it was fine. But an opportunity presented itself. I tried it. I realized it wasn't for me, and I put it away. And that's okay too. Like, it's not even a failure. It's just, you tried something, it didn't work out. That's okay. You learned something. I'm not an analyst. That's great. I can put that in a drawer somewhere, and next time somebody comes along and, hey, do you want to be an analyst for him? I'm like, no, I've tried it.
I love it. Absolutely love that. Some great insights there. So I just want to go on to like step 3, well, question 3, is find your people, right? And I mean, this is a great conversation, and something to highlight that with Ned, I've found my people, right? I think that's a great example, right, of having the right people around me, right? Or having the right interactions, or reaching out to community, or being involved. So from my experience, like, the best growth has happened when you're surrounded by a crew or a squad that challenges you, even if it's just reading some content or overhearing a conversation, but also supports you and pushes you to dream bigger. Like, I've got a team now at Code to Cloud, and we've got ambassadors and other bits and pieces, and they're always like, well, what are we going to do next to make this bigger? How are we going to, and I'm like, I'm starting to get scared a little bit, right? I'm just like, okay, but they see the energy in it, or they see the value in it, and, they support me, right? And it's the same with, again, going back to pivoting back to certifications. I don't know about you, Ned, but I've been in study groups before, to keep that accountability up, or if I'm not figuring out a subject right, or maybe one of the certifications was a step or a stretch too far for me, that I've got the right people around me. I think that's worked out well. But yeah, where have you got any scenarios or experience that you've, like you said, you met that manager of yours, right? And that role that you had, and you hit it off, and you were surrounded by your people.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had an experience of that where that just, accelerated you in the right direction?
I would say the years I spent consulting, one of the things that our manager did that I really appreciated is because we were a team of consultants, so often we were all in different projects.
Right.
I would be at client A for a couple weeks and then client B, and I would just literally never see my coworkers. And so what our manager did was he would have a monthly meeting that we all attended together, and a quarterly retreat of some kind where we would go and do an activity for an entire day together as a team. And because we were all working on different projects at different clients, we were all having these really interesting experiences and learning a ton about the technologies that we were working on. And these meetings were an opportunity to share that information, and not in like a real formal way where someone had to get up and give a big presentation about, I completed this project over at client C. It was more just like, yeah, we went out, we went to go-karting once, and the go-karting was fun, but a bigger part of it was just hanging around with each other the whole day. You got into these deep conversations of, oh yeah, I was troubleshooting this thing with Active Directory, and I learned about the admin count and what that is, and if you ever encounter these different errors, this is what it means. And just having those kinds of conversations really accelerated everyone's career, because we were all out at clients learning tons of things and making stuff work, and then coming back together and trading that information and enhancing each other's careers. And the people that I worked with, most of them no longer work for that company. They've all gone on to do other things, but I think they've all been very successful because they were in that knowledge sharing environment. And also, consulting is just an accelerator in general, because you are constantly being asked to do new and interesting things. And people assume you're the expert, so you have to be.
I actually recommend it as you should at least try being a consultant at some point in your career. Right?
Yeah.
It teaches you so much. But yeah, you sort of operate in a silo with your client, right? Like that project or that piece of work. But there's normally a bigger network, right, of you behind you, right? So other consultants, right, or other architects or whatever it may be. But yeah, that was a really interesting experience for me. I think I did like 2 years of doing that, right? Working at a partner, and I learned so much. But to your point, every meeting I turned up to, you're the expert. You're the expert, right? You had to. It was an incredible opportunity, put it that way, to learn fast as well, right? So, but it also, taught me to be more of a team player and reach out to folks when I was struggling and I needed help or support. And that builds relationships as well, right? So being vulnerable, you're not expected to know everything, right? So try and leverage your team or your network, right, to get you through that roadblock. And sometimes when you just chat to folks, like your point, they'll just randomly go, oh, I hit this issue and this is how I fixed it. And you're like, send me the script, right? Kind of thing, right? And it just, just saved you like 10 hours worth of work every week or whatever. So yeah, really, really finding your people and finding the right people and building relationships is important. And I know there's a lot of introverts out there in tech, but it's something that you've got to become good at. Otherwise, it's going to help you survive as well.
Yeah.
I think that's the right term. I love that. So we're coming up to wrap up this episode. The last point I've got is tech thrives on collaboration. So joining communities, attending events, connect with like-minded builders, right? Like I connected with Ned, right? I've been watching his content for years. Like, you know, Ned's taught me so much, and I mean, he's never even met me before, right? Until recently, until I enticed him with some landing zone Terraform deployment, right? And we spent a long time together getting to know each other whilst the deployment was happening. But yeah, I mean, my first piece of advice is like in-person events are coming back, which is great to see. Local meetups, chapters, that kind of thing. If you're just trying to figure stuff out again, like you're at step one, you know, head over to like meetup.com and go, where's the local AI group, or where's the local DevOps group, or where's the local pick your cloud, right, group, and just turn up. And even if you're sitting on the back row, right, being sheepish, trying to take it all in, and it's overwhelming, right? I remember the first time I went to an event like that, and you're thinking everybody's like got the education level of Einstein, right, and they're delivering a talk or whatever it may be. It's a great way, again, to find your people and start learning what's going on, right, in that particular field or that particular pillar. I kind of like meetups because normally there's a low dollar value for entry if you're still trying to figure stuff out, right? You get to meet your local community, right?
Yeah.
Events are another great one, but you know, I'm one of those guys that pays to go to events, but most people get their company to pay them to go to an event, right? So,
right,
it's all dependent, right? It's whatever you're interested in.
Yeah.
For you, Ned, like, do you want to touch on like online communities? Because I feel like that lowered the you know, the entry bar, right, to join in an online community, or you know, meeting people on LinkedIn or X or Blue Sky now, right?
Yeah.
What's your experience on that?
Yeah, LinkedIn and Blue Sky are the like my two primary social media platforms or whatever. But in terms of community, there's so many communities that are centered around different technologies out there that you can join. Some of which carry some level of prestige with them. Like if you want to become a Microsoft MVP, for instance, you actually have to do something to become it. But once you're inducted into the MVP community, you now have access to sort of the private chat of all these different other Microsoft MVPs, as well as people that work directly at Microsoft itself. Same sort of thing if you want to become like an AWS community hero, I think is their program. They have a couple community programs. So you could do that. And that also, you know, hooks you up with other people. There's also all the different communities around the various CNCF projects. So you could kind of lurk in the Slack for CNCF and see what project strikes your fancy. And they're always looking for people to contribute and help out. And even if you don't think you have the requisite knowledge to contribute to a particular project, I mean, sometimes they just need help copy editing, you know? Like if you're a good writer or you know, you have some other skill that's not necessarily technical, you could contribute to these communities, and it gets you plugged into a whole group of people that once they see you providing value or adding value to the community, they are incredibly helpful and want to help back. So if you need a reference or you need some guidance, some advice, or you know, you're looking for your next job, you now have a community that you can reach out and talk to. People talk about like building a network, and that sounds very mechanical to me. You know, I'm building a network. I think what's more important is to just find something that interests you, a community around that thing, and then add value to that community in whatever way you can. And people will see you adding value to that community and will want to reciprocate that. I mean, we as a species are all about reciprocity, right? You do something for me, I'll do something for you. It's like built into, I won't say it's built into our DNA, but it is definitely part of our like social evolution is, we punish people who don't reciprocate. There's some pretty famous experiments around that. So if people see you active in community, helping out, adding value, they are going to want to reciprocate and help you out as well. Don't do it for that reason. Do it because you enjoy it, but know that there's going to be a benefit at the end to you and to the community at large.
Completely agree. I have CNCF is nearest and dearest to my heart. I built a local chapter here about 2 years ago. I was starting from ground zero.
Mm-hmm.
It was literally like do you remember the film The Matrix?
Yeah.
So I'd been caught up in this big corporate world, big enterprise world, right? And everything was Microsoft stack, AWS stack. And I met this, I went to a conference out east actually, and the CNCF crew turned up at this conference and did like a deck. And they brought up this map of Canada. And this is a true story. And there was nothing in the west of Canada. Right? They had these chapters out east. And I put my hand up and went, why haven't you got anything out west? And they went, we haven't been able to find anybody. So I was like, well, hold my beer, right? Like, let me get involved, right? Because I've never built one of these before. So that's how we got started. And I had to go through like an onboarding process with the CNCF. And I started meeting all these amazing people globally, right? And I built my chapter and I started doing events. And people just started turning up, right? That I'd never met before. And it was great. And I've met some fantastic people. To the point of, I do those kind of events to push me to learn something new. We talked about deadlines before, Ed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like put the pressure. Right, I'm going to learn this so I can present it to the audience, right? I like to live life dangerously, right, by doing public speaking. So, again, most of the time, there's a low dollar value or free entry to get into these events. And it's, if anything, you're getting free education.
Yeah.
Right? So head on down, get some free pizza, maybe some, Diet Pepsi or whatever your poison is, right? And just sit back and learn something. And to your point before, Ned, right? There might be a subject and you're like, yeah, I don't want to do that. At least you don't want to do that, right? But you've met people and you know something that you didn't know before.
Absolutely.
So yeah. Well, that about come to the end of the podcast episode. I want to say I just love chatting to you, Ned. I feel like I've had similar careers.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit, just a little bit. Been through the trenches. But yeah, thanks again for coming onto the show. If folks want to find Ned in a good way, right? Obviously. But if people want to find you online, follow what you're doing next. I mean, Ned produces some amazing content. He's got an amazing YouTube channel. He's been teaching me Terraform for years and years, and he didn't know it. So where can people find you, Ned?
The best place to go is nedinthecloud.com. That's where links to everything else is. But you can also find me on LinkedIn. Just search my name. I'm pretty sure I'm the only one.
I think you are. So, but I appreciate it. Okay. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you on the next one.
You've been listening to the Code to Cloud podcast, where ideas meet innovation and the future of tech takes flight. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with your network. Let's keep building the tech community together. For more insights, resources, and updates, Follow us on social media or visit us at codetocloud.io. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and remember, every line of code has the potential to shape the future. See you in the cloud.